Hello, this is Arielle of Inconspicuous Bear, and I'll be narrating the 10-man version of the Heroic Spoils of Pandaria encounter in the Siege of Orgrimmar from a Guardian point of view. As with all of the Heroic encounter guides, I'm not going to reiterate any of the normal mechanics that just carry over into Heroic. If you need a refresher on those, you should go ahead and check out the normal version of the Spoils of Pandaria encounter guide in the top right-hand corner of the screen. There'll be a link for the next 10 or 15 seconds or so. You can just click on it, go there, and you'll be able to get that refresher that you need. The only new mechanic in the Heroic version of this encounter isn't directly affect a tank, however it kind of indirectly affects how you approach the encounter. Every time you kill a mob or the group of mobs that spawn from a particular crate, a spark, like this red glowy spark thing, flies over to the other side of the room. So it goes to the opposite group. So there's one group with the 5 or 12 people or whatever it is in 25 men, and then there's the other side with the same number of people. The spark goes to the opposite group that killed the mob, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so basically this red spark thing shows up that you have to kill, or it explodes and wipes the raid. Now this, because it doesn't actually spawn in your room from things that you do, that's why it doesn't directly affect what a particular group does in terms of ordering boxes. However, it does encourage you to open as few small boxes as possible, because that'll limit the number of sparks that spawn in the opposite room. So typically you want to open the 2 panda boxes, 2 larges, all the mediums, and only 4 smalls. However, again, this totally depends on your raid group. If you're cool with opening a whole bunch of boxes and then just nuking down ads, totally go ahead and do that. Otherwise, make a strategy that kind of goes with your group, or goes with what your group is good at. I will say that this doesn't really affect where you tank the big mobs at all. I tank the big mob, the second big mob in the middle of the room, so it makes it easier to cleave down sparks for me and the melee DPS. However, because you're still trying to open boxes as fast as you can, it doesn't really affect where you tank anything else, at least not in my experience. I don't know if other tanks have a different experience with this encounter, but it doesn't affect how where you tank things until the very last thing that you open, in my experience. So I'll describe very shortly the order of boxes that I open, and hopefully this helps you in a little bit. I mentioned before, you start with the 2 panda boxes, kill them. You can either open a small box with the pandas or not. Personally, I don't. Other people do. It just makes it easier. Me want to get the pandas down as fast as possible because there's a big DPS increase, especially the healer and the tank ones. After that, I start with the first big box on which you use Incarnation and Nature's Vigil. Now everyone should be using their 3-minute timers on this particular box, so you want to make sure that you get it open as soon as possible, so they'll be up for the second big box as well. And then you can cleave down 1 or 2 small boxes while the big one's up. Just got to make sure that you communicate with the other side that when it's possible for a small and the big guy to die at the same time, which will result in 2 sparks spawning in the other room. So you've got to make sure you communicate that with your other group. After that, you just kind of go around the room, opening every medium box. Totally feel free to open 2 medium boxes at once, because they're spread out in such a way that there will never be 2 golems 2 golem boxes for the Mogu side beside each other, and there'll never be two of the Amber Weaver, Amber Guy boxes beside each other on the Mantid side. So you can feel free to open 2 boxes that are right beside each other. Always focus down the golems first, 100% of the time. No different than on normal. And the Wind guys and Amber guys, you can kind of just cleave them down. They don't really do much. The Amber guys, obviously, the longer they're alive, the more they heal, and the more little reinforcements or whatever they spawn, but doesn't really matter. And then just kind of go around the room, opening little boxes when you have a spare moment in between cleaving down the medium ones. You want to make sure that you get 4 medium boxes at some point, because you need 4 of them, or 4 small boxes, at some point, because you need 4 of them to complete the side. And then the very last box you open is the last large box, on which you use Incarnation and Nature's Vigil again, and then you just kind of drag it to the middle of the room so you can cleave down any sparks that spawn. And especially for the Mogu side, it's important that you cleave down the statues, because they buff the amount of damage the guy's AoE ability does. So if there's 6 statues out, it'll probably one-shot a bunch of people the next time he casts his AoE ability. So make sure that you're cleaving down the statue ads when you have a chance. In terms of legendary items for this encounter, you definitely 100% want to roll with the DPS cloak, because it's a ridiculous amount of DPS, especially for what is basically a bunch of trash or a bunch of little moms that are all up at the same time, the cleave on the DPS cloak is just ridiculous, and there's nothing particularly threatening in this entire encounter in terms of like dying, so you'd be able to stay alive just fine as long as you manage your cooldowns correctly, and use Barkskin and other defensive cooldowns kind of almost in a preventative manner. So you want to use them before you might be in any sort of danger. For the meta gem, definitely use the tank one, for previously stated reasons. The DPS meta gem doesn't really do that much for tanks now, so you just pretty much just want to stick with the tank one 100% of the time. In terms of talents, you can either go with Wild Charge or Feline Switches for tier 1. Each one offers a unique advantage over the other. It's kind of really up to you what you want to roll with. I've done it with both. Personal choice. Tier 2, Sarah's Gift. This is pretty much a very common occurrence. Sonarian Ward's ability to activate off of damage taken is kind of irrelevant in a world where Frenzy Regen exists and you have a bunch of extra rage. Kind of the same goes with Renewal. Tier 3, Typhoon. Now you're hardly ever going to use it. I'd only ever use it to interrupt something or to reposition something that's standing in like a reconstitution or the red puddle, healing puddle thing that the golems do. It's pretty much the only scenario in which I'd actually use Typhoon. Tier 4, Incarnation. This is a very, very common theme in Heroic rating. You pretty much just take Incarnation because of the extra DPS cooldown that you get, and the situations in which it's useful. Tier 5, Bash. There's nothing to kite, so Vortex is pretty worthless. However, it could be advantageous to stun something sometimes. Something to keep in mind. And then Tier 6 is Natured Vigil, purely because of the amount of off-healing it does, especially during high group damage phases, like the big adds for both the Mogu and the Manted side. That's where you definitely want to line up Nature's Vigil, plus the extra DPS is always a great thing to have. There isn't anything particularly special that a Guardian can do in this encounter. I like to use Stampeding Roar at the very start and when transitioning from room to room in order to get to boxes quicker, but any Druid could do that. Other than that, lining up Nature's Vigil with high damage phases, and using Incarnation wisely on the big adds, but other than that, there isn't really much Guardian-specific stuff you can do. Can't really use Tranquility, and there's no really other utility stuff any other utility buttons that you don't want to be pressing during this encounter. So pretty much just your standard tank stuff. Just make sure that you get into a rhythm with opening boxes and that you're communicating with the other group to make sure you're not overwhelming them with sparks. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and good luck in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Two scrambles, I'll jump on.
We're gonna get screwed.
Did Bishop go help him again?
Spark.
Come on. Thank you.